on the bench, or as one member of the transition team called it, fun employed, they have two consistent regrets. First, they wish they had invested more time building and maintaining their networks. And second, they wish they had spent more time establishing their personal brands. Needless to say, we spent a lot of time in transition team talking about personal branding and how it can enhance their appeal to prospective employers. So to get deeper into this conversation with our broader Huddles community, we've invited personal branding expert, although they use the term reputation management, and I think that's a good one, and we'll get at that, Marc. Marc is the SVP of Growth at Canary, a firm that specializes in executive reputation management. He has successfully worked for Fortune 500 brands and executives, as well as entrepreneurs and small businesses. With that, hello, Marc. How are you and where are you this fine day?
Hey, Drew. Thanks for having me. I am in Hoboken, New Jersey right now.
Oh my God, they're
Excited to
just
be here.
like I could almost throw a rock that far, but
Yep.
not quite.
Almost
But
swim there.
almost swim there. Yes, at your own risk. Okay,
Yep.
so this is a question I've sort of become standard and has been really helpful for folks here. Just in case they have to leave early or we want to convince them to stay, can you provide three things executives typically get wrong when trying to build a personal brand? And just sort of list them and then we'll go through them one at a time.
Okay. Yeah. So it would be target audience, really identifying your target audience first, consistency, and focus.
Okay. All right. So this is so funny because one could argue that there is no difference between reputation management for a brand and an individual, because if we're talking about target audiences, isn't that usually the way we start with any marketing plan? But talk about that. Go through that and
Yeah.
what are they getting wrong? Too broad, too narrow, and obviously we're focused for the moment on folks that are between opportunities, but we can generalize to any CMO.
Absolutely. So what we typically will find is that there's not enough thought put on the target audience. And so a lot of times it can really be too broad. And when you're a CMO or a senior executive of any kind, you certainly want to cultivate a large audience, but you really want to make sure it's the right audience. And particularly if you're a CMO in transition too, you want to think about maybe different types of audiences that you wouldn't normally think about if you were CMO of an organization, like executive search leaders and recruiters as well. But what we typically find is there could be several audience segments that are valuable for executives. And there's the broader, executive community in a sense. So other CMOs and relevant marketing leaders and C-suite, CEOs, chief digital officers, COOs, so other relevant C-suite. Then there's also, board members as you look to maybe attract board or advisory roles, or private equity VCs as they have portfolios of companies that could potentially use your expertise. There's conference organizers as you look to maybe do more speaking, or media and journalists as you look to be interviewed. So I listed a kind of a plethora there, but the more focus, the better for
All
sure,
right.
and
So
mapping
we
that out.
can't possibly effectively create reputations that appeal to all of those folks, right? So part of this process is narrowing that down, or at least put a first tier, second tier, third tier, I would think. Uh,
Yeah, the tiering is really what we find is important because you could create content that is really focused on certain segments, but still be deliberate about connecting in and growing an audience with all of them.
so let's say we've narrowed it down a little bit. What does it practically mean to have a more narrow target audience when I mean, how does that lead to, because we're talking strategy first before we get to execution, that enable us to do so we have a tighter target audience? I mean, we're talking about creating content, we're talking about actions that we're doing in
Yeah.
social. What Connect the dots for us?
Yeah. So one is you want to make sure that you're creating content that's going to actually engage the right audience, the target audience that you identify. So when you have that target audience very clear initially, it really helps with understanding what type of topics and content you're going to be creating so that it's really interesting and engaging to that audience. It also helps you understand who you should be deliberate about in terms of commenting and connecting in with in general. So, you may have a system where you're going to engage with X amount of people per week or connect in with X amount of people per week. And you want to make sure that there's focus on that and that it's very systematized. So it's not taking a ton of your time.
So good, and I rate that because whether you're full time, on the job or you're, looking for an opportunity, there is a limited number of hours in the day. So talk a little bit about, as you work with folks, what is a reasonable number of people to try to engage with on a weekly basis?
Sure. So, in terms of engagement, it's really interesting because there's different types of engagement, right? There's you trying to grow your audience in terms of connecting in with someone, then there's commenting on people's posts, reshares, so forth. So what we find is that the commenting and the reshares, you want to do it every single week, but the frequency of that could depend because you're also relying on other people to be posting so you can comment on their posts. So there could be weeks where industry news is happening, there's a lot going on, and people are quite active. And so those weeks, it will make more sense to do more engagement oriented content in a sense. But then there's going to be weeks where maybe, okay, there's just a little bit less activity in general. You still want to keep it consistent, but in terms of you're still engaging with people, but on those weeks you may be doing a little bit more original thought leadership, or sharing relevant articles with an insight and a point of view.
And lots of different ways to go on this, but it just occurs to me that if you are trying to build a relationship with a certain number of specific individuals, uh, you if you're lucky and they're like me, where I'm posting every Saturday at 9 or 10 a.m., but I don't think most people are that way. So the flip side of that is obviously getting to your sort of consistency point, like, and we can go there. But that is an interesting conundrum, is that here you are targeting these folks, and if you want to engage with them and they're not posting, and they're not posting at the same time, that's a problem. So I guess it's a lot easier to engage with someone who is really consistent.
Yeah, and I think it's also just understanding, if your target audience is other, relevant CMOs and CEOs of certain B2B companies or SaaS companies or even this specific industry, there's going to be ones you'll probably identify that are quite active, and then ones that are maybe less active, but when they do post, you want to make sure you're nurturing the relationship by engaging with them. And then consistency as a whole
Right.
is super important because we all know at this point, kind of LinkedIn, just like all other social channels, the algorithms reward directly consistency of sharing content with visibility. They're looking at people who they would consider to be highly active users. So that's why you want to make sure you are sharing content consistently overall.
And
um,
what does that,
yeah,
so expand on that. What is consistent mean? I mean, I know,
yeah.
I post every day, but my big pieces are Saturday morning. What are we talking about in terms of consistency?
So what we really recommend is you want to be posting 4 blended posts per week. And when I talk about blended posts, it's because another thing that's important besides just the consistency is that you're not sharing the same type of post each week. So, or each time. So if every single time you're posting an article and an insight, that's a type of post. It's an article share. If
Right.
every single time you're just commenting on someone else's post, that's a type of post. You want to be sharing this mix of content 4 times a week. That would include sharing your own original insights in a short form post. That would include sharing a relevant article around industry news, but always with a unique insight and a point of view. That would include engaging directly on key people's posts. And then you can take that a little further and you can include video content, you sharing insights, even like the way that we're talking right now. Like I'm at my desk, we're just talking 30-second to 1 minute videos where you're sharing industry knowledge and insights in an authentic way. That type of content also does well. LinkedIn polls, as an example. is a type of content. So 4 blended posts per week is what we find. You can really leverage the reward you get from LinkedIn's algorithm, for instance, without oversharing.
Interesting. Boy, there's a lot to go in on all of those individual things. I think one of the highlights that I want to just mention is I see a lot of reshares where there was no value add.
Yeah,
And
that's important.
yeah, and so the adding a perspective that is adds to your, it's like, I don't know why I got this analogy, but you're a snowball and you want to add to the snowball. And if you add an insight and it has nothing to do with anything that you've defined your personal brand as, that's not cumulative, right? So it's an insight from your perspective that is building to this larger reputation, right? I mean, hey, this was really
Exactly.
interesting. It gave me an idea for how to do fly fishing better.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to just highlight too is you want to take the long view when it comes to consistency and not short term. This is really huge. We find people who tend to win when it comes to building a personal brand and the people who become like influencers in their industry and have this large audience, they didn't start yesterday. They've been doing this for some time. So you need to understand, okay, if you're doing 4 posts per week and you're going to commit to that, different types of content, think about that multiplier effect over a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's going to be a huge difference. There's hundreds if not thousands of posts that you've shared at that time. So really also understanding the long-term view of this.
Okay, so we really are talking about a snowball effect here, that
Yeah.
it's just one snowflake after another building and eventually creating some critical mass. Uh,
Yeah.
and so that's hard. And it's sort of funny. This is the same conversation that CMOs have about, kind of brand building or reputation building. It's like, guys, it's going to take time. No. We need our pipeline full tomorrow. Right. And so you have to take a longer term perspective on your own reputation build because it's going to take, you know, um, how do you know? So, all right, let's stay with consistency. We've got the types that we've talked about. Um, and then, we talked target audience consistency. I don't feel like we've really gotten focused on focus very well. So what did you mean?
Yeah, so with focus, I mean that what we do find also is that a lot of executives now, they will tend to post about so many different things. And so it's really hard for people to understand what they're known for. And so what we always recommend is identify really no more than 3 key topics, 3 core themes. Now, there could be subtopics within these kind of 3 core themes or three, we call them content pillars, but no more than 3 content pillars so that all the content you are sharing is keying up to one of those 3. And sometimes that could even be 2 pillars. In certain situations, you'll even see it's 1 pillar, but no more than 3 core topics. And that gives you a really good framework to create content that does not go outside of those topics, but you could still hit on subtopics within them.
Yeah,
And I can give an example too.
and that creates its own challenges too, because like I've kind of iterated on that. Okay, right, and so they have to be broad enough that you can keep creating content. So
Like
practically
future of
speaking,
B2B marketing. That could be that's very broad, right? Future
right?
of B2B marketing as an example. There's a lot of things changing within that. There's AI, there and marketing technology, and consumer insights and data. And so it's like there's quite a few things you can hit on, but the overall theme is you are a leader and building a leading voice when it comes to the future of B2B marketing.
So a big question is, so I'm a full-time CMO. I've got a big demanding job. I barely have time to say hello to my family and breathe, let alone eat lunch. And what you're describing 4 times a week, highly thoughtful, there's got to be a certain minimum number of hours required to do this over time. I mean, talk a little bit about just, yeah, I mean, obviously you guys do this for executives, but how many
Yeah.
hours are we talking about to sort of get this flywheel
Stop.
moving, that the snowball started
I'm
and
listening to something.
consistent.
Hang
Yeah,
on.
yeah, go for
Fuck.
it. Thanks, Jared. Go ahead. Are you there, Mark?
Oh yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
You were waiting for
Uh,
the question. How many hours does
yeah.
it take to
So
keep doing this well?
I would say when it comes to hours, it can depend. I mean, one of the biggest reasons we've been around for about 13 years is because a lot of executives and CMOs don't have the time to do this. So, it can kind of depend on your industry, how niche it is, how broad you're going. But to do it yourself in a meaningful way, I would say it could be anywhere from, 1 to 2 hours to 4 hours, a week, depending on how much time you want to dedicate to it, the systems that you have in place. Um, and that's part of the reason, that we've kind of built our solution is because that's, I'd say, a huge problem that we're solving for. But
Yeah.
it can really range. It's hard for me to say this is the exact amount of time you want to dedicate because it can depend quite a lot if you're in a super niche technical industry versus much broader. So yeah.
So let's just put 4 hours on the table for a
Yeah.
second. So, over the course of the year, that's 200 hours. And what I'm wondering is what's a realistic, so I've done this. What should I be thinking about from a measurement standpoint and ROI standpoint? I mean, because I could have spent that 4 hours a week just on the business, nose to the grindstone, helping the business grow. Uh, I'm taking that time away from something. So I need to be able to rationalize to myself or to the company that this is worthwhile.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where there's going to be a few benefits in terms of like overall outcomes. So one is you need to invest in your personal brand, your overall career, and so this is going to ensure that you're staying top of mind, highly relevant, and you could have specific goals like I want to attract board advisory roles. I want to attract my next role. I want speaking engagements, media and journalist interviews. And there's a way to tie in those outcomes to your overall strategy. Business development for sure. However, what you want to do again is you want to look at it in the long term. So if you've been doing this over the course of a year, let's say 1 year you've been doing it consistently, outline before what those few ideal outcomes are. And of course, there's social media outcomes, right? Like follower growth, engagement, reach. And that's something that's also, of course, quite important to track. But now we're actually talking about business outcomes or personal goals and outcomes. Identify those. If after a year you haven't come close to achieving any of those personal outcomes or business outcomes or goals, then something needs to be shifted and changed. So that's what I would say. And then of course you also want to be tracking, audience growth, follower growth, engagement, because that all shows that you're moving in the right direction as well. And I also would really recommend kind of almost like benchmarking yourself too against other relevant leaders in your industry so you can get a sense of within your industry how your presence is growing and building. And the way that we find is really valuable for that is you identify, other peers at your level that are doing it really well, that are doing it where you think to be like okay, and then are not really doing it at all.
So one of the things we know, so this is really interesting thing. I'm a CEO. I'm looking at my CMO. They're sort of building a following on LinkedIn. I'm kind of feeling, yeah, great, good for them, but how's it good for the company? And it is good for the company, but the mindset there's an educational process, which is people don't really engage with companies on LinkedIn.
Right.
They
Yeah.
engage with people. And so the whole
Yeah.
story is you need high level executive connections. I'm sorry, you need executive reputations if you want to brand on LinkedIn. There's no other way.
Totally true. And I mean, LinkedIn's even put out, there's a lot of studies they've put out. The most recent one I saw was executive profiles, individual profiles get 8 times more engagement than that of company and brand profiles.
I got to repeat that. Wait, individuals get
Yeah,
8 times the engagement that a company does.
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't want to I know it's 8 times, but I could have sworn I saw one more recent that was 12 times. But let's just go with 8 just in case.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
yeah.
if I look at the engagement of a post, the same exact post on CMO Huddles as LinkedIn profile versus mine, it's probably 30x.
Yeah.
Uh,
Totally. And it's to your point, Drew. It's what you said. People want to follow other people. They want to hear from other people. They want to hear from industry leaders and experts versus company and brand profiles. And especially if you're trying to engage decision makers and a senior audience, they're way more likely to engage with the key leaders versus a company and brand profile.
Right. And this isn't just about you, the marketer, building your profile. This is you understanding how to build it and experimenting to do it so that you can do it for your CEO, assuming they're game. You can do it for or you can hire a firm like Canary to do it for some person so that you are established as thought leaders in the industry. And it's hard to be a thought leader if you have no followers.
Totally. And then the other way we find it's a great way to scale thought leadership for your company because you now have multiple channels sharing content, right? You have the company profiles that are sharing, more like branded content. Then you might have several executives that are sharing content and thought leadership around the mission of the company and trends and insights, but also sharing content around their specific area of expertise. So you build vertical thought leadership for the company. So now the company could be known not just for the specific product or service, but also as a digitally innovative company, because this person who's a leader on digital transformation, or this person who's a leader when it comes to customer experience. So you can scale that thought leadership. And if you're a smaller company and you're competing in a space where there's huge companies, you can actually really help shift the perception of your voice in the industry through leveraging
you
the executives.
you could be perceived as more influential than
Yeah.
your market share might justify, which
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about the thing I notice a lot of CMOs do is they share a lot of content that comes from the brand. And that content is often very product focused and it's very, hey, we just announced our new blah blah blah, or we have a webinar coming up on this, and there's no insight, there's no value add. It's just I'm a shill for my company. Here's something that they said, but and then I'll see it 5 days a week.
Yeah.
I think I have a feeling that's probably not a prescribed way of growing your personal brand or even helping the company for that matter.
Yeah, no, and you actually used a word that I've used too, which is the word like shill. And I think that's the perception is you need to have a balance there because especially as a CMO and even as just a senior executive, you do want to share company insights and initiatives at times. But what we usually say is like 70 to 80% should be focused on thought leadership and insights where you're adding value to your audience. And that can tee up to the mission of the company and the industry, but it shouldn't be sharing a company specific post, especially with no insight. So then 20 to 30% of the content you share, I would say be company specific. So it doesn't just look like you're an advertisement for your company and there's no, it's not genuine, it's not authentic. And, we'll talk about authenticity too.
Well,
Um,
and I just
yeah,
want to build on this for a second because there's a difference. Like when I see a CMO posting, hey, we just had our customer conference and there's a picture, or they're thanking the team and there's a picture of the conference, or there's a picture of the CMO with a couple of customers, or those do great.
yeah,
And it's funny because it's like you're with people, you're showing a picture. It feels very authentic. It feels very real. So I'm not saying you can't post and share stuff about your company, but it's like, what makes it personal to you? What makes it part of your brand? And how are you bringing value to your community through this share? And I don't think that and that filter is used very often.
yeah. And I think to your point before, you always want to be adding an insight and a point of view and adding something to a reshare. And then as CMOs, you can do what most CMOs do best, which is tell a story, and that should go through. I think all the content is tying it back in a through a good storytelling way to personal experience or insights. The other interesting thing, because you highlighted, like, they're at a conference with their team, we've done some research and we found that images with people in them do better. So if you have images with people in those images, it does better than just a product. So there's certain little things there that make a big difference in terms of engagement. Also, if you're sharing an image, sharing a post with with your team at the image, you're probably tagging your team in it. Then they're getting notified, they're engaging, then their audiences are seeing it. So you're going to get more overall engagement typically. But it's really important that you think through the company content that you're sharing, that it's not an overwhelming amount of just branded content with no insight or tying back to anything personal that you can add to it.
uh, Again, when you hire someone on your team and you're excited about doing it, it feels very personal. Why? Because I'm building a team, I'm growing a company, and that could be a pillar. You're a leader and you're being able to express. What does a leader do? They hire a great team, right? And they set the vision and they allocate resources. Those are the three sort of big roles. So, yay, if you think about that. We have some questions that I want to make sure we address while they're top of mind. Uh, what is an example of the granularity of a content pillar?
Yeah, so a content pillar, we
Mhm.
see that as a theme that should have subtopics within it. So your overall pillar slash theme could be broader. It could be, you know, as broad as the future of B2B marketing, but then what are those sub context supporting categories within it? So as I kind of mentioned before, from a high level, AI, data insights, audience engagement, ad tech, martech, various types of topics that within that overall theme you want to be touching on through your content and through storytelling.
Okay. This is an interesting one, and I'll be how do you get tagged with top or leading voice label? And actually, I'm going to make it more specific.
Yeah.
Have you worked with a client who was able to achieve that goal? And if so, how did
Oh
that work?
yeah. 100%. Yeah, we've worked with many clients that have achieved
Mhm.
that. And it's interesting. Top voice is different than having a badge. So it can get a little confusing because LinkedIn used to have the LinkedIn influencer program. And some people may remember that, where it was really like, there was no way to get it other than LinkedIn really reaching out to you. People who have who are considered influencers were as big names as like Bill Gates, like celebrity business leaders, all the way down to, just executives at, large or fast growing companies. Maybe they got a good amount of notoriety. They did away with that. Top Voices is now that LinkedIn influencer program. So with Top Voices, it's different than when you get that badge, because when you get a badge where you're looked at as a top voice within a certain category, you can get that from answering questions through LinkedIn's, where they kind of prompt you to answer questions, right? To get a top voice, LinkedIn needs to reach out to you and give that to you. So there's no way other than being consistent, active, and building a presence, where you're going to get the top voice that's not specific to an industry. So you'll see people where it's like top voice in healthcare, top voice. That's great. You can get that from being active and answering questions. But if you just get that top voice overall badge, that's like being the LinkedIn influencer. And when you have the top voice overall badge, you get a significant amount more reach and engagement typically on your posts.
Yeah, and I just to answer that question as a top voice, it was just random. They showed up one day and said, "Hey, Drew, you're it," and that was 3+ years ago. And in truth, my following has grown dramatically, not because of that, but because of my Saturday series of posting 34 weeks in a row in the same long format on a Saturday with the same visual type so folks know. And because those posts have gone viral, uh, And by that, I mean anything, I'll call it anything over 5,000 organic impressions as far as I'm concerned is viral. Uh, but some of them have gotten crazy numbers. And so, but it's the consistency of that. Uh, and so it's funny. I don't think that the top voice has actually meant that much. And Newsbreak, they're bringing back an influencer program. And
Yeah.
again, it's invitation only.
Yeah, it's
So
going to be
go ahead.
exactly. And the other thing I was going to say that you touched on, which I think is also really important, is you were saying that Saturdays you post at the same time. And that's actually something we found to be really important is ideally you want to be posting at the same times each week on the same days.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an interesting one, a little micro one, but I love it and I've seen it work well or backfire on people. What's your advice on how many people to tag in a post?
Oh yeah, this is actually really it's a great question because I'll tell you that LinkedIn will penalize you if you tag people that don't engage back.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to back up for a quick second because there's kind of three core buckets that LinkedIn puts all your content in. There's the high quality bucket, which means they consider this a high quality post. It got pretty good engagement early on after you posted it, and it's going to get more engagement from there, more reach, which will should lead to engagement. There's the low quality bucket, which means it's not spam. They don't consider it spam, but they're going to limit the reach that that post gets. And then there's a spam bucket, which means you're getting basically no reach on that post. And if you tag too many people who don't engage back for too many times in a row, you're either going to get in the low quality or spam bucket very quickly, and it can really hurt you. So, what I would say the general rule of thumb is only tag people that you really think are going to engage back with your post.
And by the way, just to sort of put a pin on that, the posts that have gone, in fact, I don't tag anybody on my Saturday posts, and yet they have gone
Interesting.
viral, which is really interesting. Not a
Yeah.
single. And the ones that I do tag, I tend to tag in a message as opposed to in the body of the copy. I don't know if that matters or not, but I'm very conscious because I get tagged in things and I find it annoying because I'll get tagged in something and it's not relevant or I don't have time and they just don't realize that they're hurting themselves by doing it.
Right. 100%. And it's interesting because you were talking about the comment, like tagging people in the comment and things like that. One of the things that recently came out was obviously this year, and probably in the last year and a half, there's been a large uptick of AI driven content, as you can imagine.
Right.
And so one of the things LinkedIn has seen is a big uptick of AI comments, like automated AI comments. And so because of that, they're giving a little bit less reach to, like, you used to get a lot of reach if you got a lot of comments on your post. They're giving that less authority because they're trying to, and especially if it's a super generic comment and if it's this always like a similar comment from the same person.
Right.
So with comments in general, you want to make sure that it's not a super simple comment and you're not always engaged, on the same post from the same person.
Interesting. So this is a question about. Oh, so I just want to get back to it. Matter whether if you tag them in a comment or whether you tag them in a. Do you have any idea? Have you ever seen anybody study that with in the body versus in a comment?
So what I can tell you with the tagging is in general, whether you're tagging them in the body or in the comment, really make sure that there's a strong likelihood they're going to engage back no matter what. People
Right.
used to do this with external links.
Right.
It used to be like you post something, then you put the
Right.
external link in the comment, and that used to help. But even that we're seeing is it's not making as much of a difference anymore.
Right. Uh, that is interesting. Um, on commenting in general, and this gets to a question someone asked in chat, which is just why do I think my Saturday posts have done well? And there's sort of two factors in there. One is that I try to touch a nerve in the industry. I really think about what is something that is a source of pain for someone in a CMO role. And so if I and you can actually typically tell, is this a real pain? Is this something because then people will comment and engage with it in a very emotional way. Uh, And I think that's kind of all I can get to in terms of why it's not the penguin images. The only thing that the penguin images do is it's a signal to people who are reading it, who've done it before, that it's coming. The other thing, that when the post goes viral, really truly viral, like the where it gets over 25,000, what you see in the comments is a debate.
Yeah,
Usually
back and
someone
forth.
has said, great post, Drew, but, and then they have a long list of issues that they had with the post. And then people sort of agree or disagree. And there's real, suddenly you have not 10 comments, but you have 100 comments, and they're just
That's huge.
commenting on their comments.
The other thing that's super important for the overall reach of a post is the first few hours. So the first hour, some people may have heard this phrase golden hour. First hour they find to be the most important, but then still the first 4 or 5 hours are extremely important to the overall reach that a post is going to get. So if you get a lot of comments, and especially if you get what you were talking about, which is a debate, so people commenting and engaging, that's what LinkedIn wants. They want people to have a conversation. And so that's going to get a significant amount of reach, and especially if it's within the first few hours of the post.
Right. So that debate. And it's funny because uh, I don't know if you found best day of the week or time of post going to my specific Saturday posts. The only reason they're on Saturday is that the rest of the week is full. And so that was one
Sure.
day of my calendar. And I will say that it's not always that first hour for those. There seems to be a rolling thing. And if I get a threshold by the end of the day, like if by the end of Saturday, there's 2,500 reach, I know it'll get to 10,000 by Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Saturday thing is really interesting. I also think people, they have time on Saturdays sometimes to maybe engage with, or if you've built out a network of people who really value your content, they're busy throughout the week and they're catching up on it, over the weekends. In general, what I can tell you in terms of best times from just, doing this for thousands of executives over the years and looking at it is 8 to 11 a.m. your local time tends to be the best in general for engagement.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. Uh, let's see. All right, we have another question. What if we're leading with customer stories and how they are solving their problems using tech? Uh, in terms of this, I think gets back to our conversation about not shilling for the brand, but still sharing content that is brand uh, supporting.
Yeah, I think the big thing with that is, is there a value added insight that your target audience is going to get out of that? If there is, I think it's going to do well. And then also, if you're sharing something like a customer story of how the product or service really helped the customer, you want to think about things like LinkedIn carousels. You want to think about imagery, as well as the text. But how can you use all these other elements to make it really compelling and to make it very easy to understand? And then you combine that, making sure it's really insightful. So someone is, the target audience is going to find this interesting, and then you use the right elements, and that can do quite well. And then if you can add an authentic touch, storytelling touch, um, even better.
So kind of add your own story on top of these stories is
If you
interesting.
could, yeah, tie it back to like a personal experience or problem that you had,
Right.
and yeah,
So I know that when you and I first talked, because you did an analysis of mine, you really encouraged me to go beyond LinkedIn, which I haven't done, and kind of
sure,
ignored all the other social channels. One, I don't play in X because I just don't think it's a brand safe environment. Uh, but I'm curious. Uh, to advise your executives in terms of social beyond LinkedIn?
Yeah, so in general, what we find is it is important to really have a holistic approach to your overall online presence and digital footprint. You know, all these channels, many of these channels, really all of them are going to rank well in Google and in search engines. And so LinkedIn certainly is one extremely important channel. I mean, LinkedIn's the kind of channel like if you're not on there, it looks odd or suspicious. So I would say it's a must have for especially for any CMO, right, or executive. And I think that that's understood, of course. The other channels, though, the way that we find is really valuable to look at them is how can you further own and control your overall digital footprint and online presence. So when someone looks you up, not just on LinkedIn, but on Google as a whole, there's a lot of information about you that highlights you in a very positive, consistent way and makes it very clear around your expertise and the topics you want to be known for. So, with X as a good example, super polarizing in the last 2 years, right? And honestly, with X, there is value there for executives and CMOs, and I think it becomes very personal, person to person, because what we find with X is, there is a lot less bots there in the last 2 years. It's now there's a huge push for verification, so your audience there is much more likely real people versus bots. It still ranks extremely well in Google. In fact, not just the profile, but the most recent X posts or tweets. We know that you'll still see, an industry publication put out, the top marketers or the top CMOs to follow on X. And so there's this kind of third party or earned media, third party validation that you can get from it. And it just depends on your personal view. And if you really feel strongly that you don't want to be on that channel, then I would not go on that channel. But that with other channels is an example, I would say, of building a broader professional brand, because one channel like LinkedIn is going to be super important. And, some could argue like, hey, let's really grow on just LinkedIn or one channel first. And that's a fair argument. But what I would also say is having an optimized profile, even if you're less active on some of these other channels, it gives you more ownership and control of what people find about you. And so it could even be that you're much more active on a channel like LinkedIn, but you do have a profile that still highlights you in a positive, consistent way, and you're still posting there, but just much less frequently. Medium.com is another channel we find to be very valuable for executives. It's a blog publishing channel where you have a lot of, we find senior C-suite executives, industry experts across pretty much every vertical you can imagine. And the reason that it's been a valuable channel is because one, the audience we find to be quite good, but also the individual blogs on Medium will rank in Google, not just the profile. So you're from an SEO perspective, if you're publishing relatively consistently on Medium, someone looks you up, they're going to see your profiles, and then they're going to see these individual blogs that you've been publishing as well, which is really valuable for owning and controlling your Google search results. There's a few other channels that I could tell you we're paying very close attention to and could be there very soon. And one is X Threads, not X Threads,
Right.
kind of built to be a competitor of X, right?
Sure.
Obviously created by Meta, which is no joke. They're not going anywhere. And with X, or rather with Threads, obviously there was this huge announcement to tons of users, and that went down a lot pretty quickly.
Right.
Right now, there's 200 million active users. A lot of industry experts and professionals are posting there. What we generally see is they're getting less engagement, but it's that is increasing quite a bit. And so if you're an executive and you just I'm not doing X, I don't like it, I don't want it. What I would say is check out Threads, start to get active there. People are sharing more insight oriented thought leadership content there now in Threads. The other channel is, um, and I think a lot of people are also looking at this is Instagram, where it's still personal by nature, we find for most executives, but the millennial audience is very native to it. I'm a millennial. I'm 37 years old. And so the millennials are becoming executives in a way. And so the reason I say that is like, you don't need to go jump and say, oh my God, what's my thought leadership strategy on Instagram tomorrow? But pay attention to it because we could very easily see that, and we already see that a little bit, becoming more of a thought leadership channel as those generations, millennials and below, start to become executives. And they're very native to that channel.
Reddit, Substack, any of those sort of
Yeah.
matter?
Reddit is interesting, but I wouldn't say is something that, from an executive standpoint, that you need to really spend time on. I mean, it's good to learn things. It's very anonymous in general.
Right.
So Reddit, no. For building a personal brand as a CMO, B2B CMO or CMO or executive, no. Substack is really interesting. But with Substack, what we find is you need to have you use that channel to build a deeper connection with your audience when you've already cultivated a large and engaged audience. So, and you need to be really make sure you're going to be writing consistently there. And so if you don't have already a very dedicated, large and engaged audience, I wouldn't start on Substack. I would start on LinkedIn, on these other channels, X, Medium, Threads, build that audience, and then think about Substack as more kind of behind the scenes premium or content that's going to allow them to build a deeper connection with you, or you to
So
build a deeper
for
connection with them.
Medium, does it like could you take content that you shared on LinkedIn and just put it on Medium and would that work?
You would need to certainly like repurpose it. So the overall theme of a blog, let's say that you put on LinkedIn articles, their blog publishing feature,
Mm-hmm.
the overall theme could be the same, but you never, of course, want to just copy and paste something from one channel to the next. It's not going to rank in Google for SEO
Right,
reasons.
because in theory, Instagram, that article uh, would show up. I just always wonder about Google and its ability to search LinkedIn, but uh,
Right. That's why you don't see when you look someone up, you'll see their profile, but you're not really seeing individual blogs ranking on LinkedIn.
right. So
Occasionally, but
couldn't you, if you did the equivalent of a blog post on LinkedIn, it feels like Medium would be completely different sort of Google sphere. In theory, you could try it, I guess.
for sure. And exactly. And just repurpose it though. Don't make sure it's not copy and pasted exactly the same.
Right. Uh, Interesting. Okay. So one of the things that I just want to sort of help with the business case of this, you're a CMO, you're working, you're building your personal brand. One of the things that we've noticed is that as followers of Drew Neiser on LinkedIn went up, of our CMO Huddles newsletter went up faster. So there was this sort of halo effect on, but they didn't follow our channel. They subscribed to our newsletter, and we didn't do anything other than me
You
being
were active.
consistent. So,
And
and
yeah,
that has definite business value. I mean, it's grown from 0 to 4,500 subscribers, and probably half of that came this since my Saturday blog series. So it is kind of interesting where the value might show up from an executive sharing things to the brand.
yeah, exactly. So we actually find, especially in the B2B space, the way you can build the influence and reputation of an organization is through the key talent and through the key leaders. And so when you have brands sharing content from the key leaders and executives, we actually find that helps drive more overall engagement to the brand channels than when they're just even posting brand content themselves.
Right. So express a point of view, do it consistently, have a focus and an audience. And as you do that, there will be a ripple effect, maybe even a multiplier effect of goodness to the overall brand. Okay. A couple questions that came through. Examples of an executive profile on Instagram that we should probably follow for an example. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it kind of depends, but you'll see certain industry executives that are a little bit more active on Instagram. So there's the CEO of Newsweek, still not super active, but a little bit more active there, and he's actually, I'd say, a younger CEO. I think he's in his like early 40s or so, and so that's one example. But there's a lot of there's many others. Obviously Gary Vee's got a very big presence overall,
Right.
and you don't need to do that yet to start. But Instagram overall, you'll notice that what's really doing well there is not just posts, but reels. Reels are doing extremely well. And what I want to highlight about that is that this reels effect, the TikTok effect too, you're starting to see that in LinkedIn. LinkedIn launched their LinkedIn videos, right? So you can upload a video natively to a post, but then you could also post through videos, and that gets a significant amount of engagement. It's horizontal, the video, not vertical, which is that TikTok, Instagram, Reels type
Right.
effect. So, and the point that I'm getting to with that is when LinkedIn or other channels launch a new feature, they're tending to give a lot of reach to that
Right.
feature. So when they launched this, and even now, if you're an early adopter of these new features, you're going to get a lot of reach on them. Newsletters is
Right.
a good example. When they launched newsletters, if you got on that and started testing it out, you were getting a lot more organic reach.
Right. Uh, we're running out of time, but uh, this is an interesting one. Sometimes this drives me crazy, which is they'll have a little post and then they'll say, to read the whole thing, visit my blog on Medium or somewhere else, right? And I find that I personally find that annoying because couldn't you just give me 500 words so I get the gist of it?
Sure.
But a lot of people do that. Is that when, and obviously sometimes you need more than 500 words to get across all the stuff that you want to share. So is it about posting on a Medium and then including in a LinkedIn, an intro to it? Is that part of it?
Yeah. So when it comes to that, I mean, the first thing that's really interesting is, LinkedIn wants you to stay on their platform. They really don't want you to leave their platform.
Right.
So ideally, when you're posting like a long form blog on LinkedIn, you want to publish it through LinkedIn articles, their blog publishing feature. However, if you give enough value, maybe you give half the blog there and you say to read the full thing, go to Medium or go to my blog or website, that can be effective.
Right.
But for the most overall reach and engagement, you really want to try to keep people on that specific blog.
Native.
Um, and if you're going to share a post and ultimately link to it in a broader way, try to give value in the way that you share it. Make sure it's not just one line. Give value. Like, here's the 5 most important things if you want to read through to see the real details, but here's the 5 most important things from this blog I just published. And make sure, at least from a high level, those are in the post that you're sharing.
I had a question. I want to go back to something and then we have to wrap up because we're running out of time. But so knowing that I don't want to tag people in certain posts, but I do want them to see them, I've now gotten the habit of sharing to individuals that might have been the same people that I would have tagged. Um, I don't think LinkedIn is punishing me for that. And I have found that those individuals usually say, thank you for sharing. And sometimes they go back and leave a comment. Is that a way to sort of
Totally.
deal with a tagging thing? It's a little takes a little time because you have to remember who it is. It takes a little more time to do it that way.
Yeah, that's 100% not going to be penalized unless they felt you were spamming them and they went and clicked block, or things like that. But
Right.
yeah, you're not going to get penalized for sharing something with someone if they don't engage back, which in tagging that could hurt you.
Got it. All right. Less tagging, more sharing direct to those individuals. Okay. Let's wrap up. 2 do's, 1 don't for marketing executives looking to strengthen their personal profiles.
Yes. So a few things here. One is, share content consistently and insight oriented content, not overly promotional content. I'm sure everyone's kind of sees certain people if you're posting too promotional. So give people a reason to want to follow you. Don't post and ghost. That's another thing that you want to make sure you're doing. Meaning, if you post something and you're getting engagement on it, engage back, right? That's going to help the algorithm. That's really what LinkedIn and these channels want.
And can I just
Um,
double down on that for one quick second? I've really noticed a
yeah,
difference. It's not thanking them for commenting. It's going back and asking them a question. See, what was it about this that you liked or didn't like? And I know
smart.
you had a but
I
in
agree.
there. It's really engaging with them on a thoughtful level. That's where the time, where this becomes so time consuming, though.
Absolutely. And I think that's smart because you're getting them to engage more through that. And then I'd say the last thing is like storytelling is great, especially as CMOs. This is a strength, and you want to showcase yourself as a great storyteller. So if you can combine that storytelling aspect with the insight oriented content and posting consistently.
I love it. Okay, I just saw a comment. I have to thank you, Jeff Morgan, for this. Fire, frequent, insightful, relevant, and entertaining. That's a magic. That is the formula for fire. All right, Marc Reichel. I'm sorry, Reichel, as in Michael. Marc, thank you
Nailed
so
it.
much for being with us. Where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on X, also Medium, and then you can also email me. Feel free to email me at mark.reichel, Reichel, Mark with a C, at canary.com, Qnary.com.
I love it. Well, it's an amazing conversation. Lots of good insights. I really appreciate you and the work you're doing. Let's maybe shift from calling it personal branding to executive reputation management. That just sounds a lot better than to me, and I think it's a little more accurate. All right. Thank you all for hanging with us.